I stare at my wedding mood board. James's name flashes on my phone. I am supposed to be planning the rest of my life with him, only 3 months until I walk down the aisle. But as soon as I hear his voice, there's a cold crack in everything. I can't marry you. Us. They showed me proof. I sat at my dining table, bathed in late afternoon light, surrounded by glossy wedding magazines, fabric swatches, and color samples. My wedding mood board, pinned with dreams, from a lace veil to the beachfront ceremony, stared back at me like a promise. I was 3 months away from walking down the aisle toward the man I love, James. Everything was perfect. I picked up my phone and smiled when his name lit up the screen, James calling. Just seeing it made my stomach flutter, the way it had from our very first date. I tapped answer with a grin, already planning how to persuade him into grabbing Thai takeout after work. Hey, almost done with work. I was thinking we could, I began, but my voice trailed off. He didn't answer right away. Instead, I heard his breathing, shaky, distant. Then his voice, hollow, cold, like he was speaking through a tunnel. Davina, something isn't right. It was the kind of tone people use when delivering bad news they've rehearsed 100 times. The kind you never think you'll hear from the man you're about to marry. But we'll get to that moment. Right now, I want you to understand how everything felt before. Because this wasn't a relationship built in haste. James and I met at a mutual friend's charity gala 2 years ago. He was the calm to my chaos, analytical, soft-spoken, grounded. I was the creative spark, always in motion, building my own event planning business from scratch. Somehow we balanced each other. He understood my long work hours, even admired my ambition. When I collapsed from exhaustion last February, he brought me homemade soup and insisted I rest. He wasn't just a partner, he was my person. And my family? They adored him. At least that's what they told me. Blair, my older sister, always played the composed one. A lifestyle influencer with perfect skin, a curated life, and a loyal online following. She hugged me when we got engaged, tightly, maybe too tightly, and said, "Wow, you actually did it." Good for you, sis. Our mom, Elaine, played the doting matriarch. Always dressed like she was one garden party away from royalty. She raised us with phrases like, "Family first, and we only want what's best for you." She'd host Sunday dinners with perfect wine pairings and whisper supportively when I vented about work stress or fears that James might one day leave me like my college boyfriend did. "You can always trust your family to have your back," she'd say, brushing my hair behind my ear like I was still 10. So I did. I trusted them. I led them into every corner of my life. I asked their opinions on flower arrangements, let Blair recommend photographers, invited Mom to meet the caterer. I even shared my deepest insecurities with them because why wouldn't I? They were my family, and James, he was the future. We picked honeymoon spots, argued over cake flavors, joked about what our kids would look like. He once texted me in the middle of a meeting just to say, "I can't wait to see you in that dress." Back then, I believed the worst was behind me. A few failed relationships, a job I outgrew, a rough patch in college. I had worked hard to build a life filled with beauty and meaning. But when I heard James' voice on the phone that day, everything began to shift. The cracks weren't new. They had been forming for years. I just hadn't noticed. "Davina, I can't do this." The pen in my hand slipped, dragging a blue streak across a sample wedding invitation. I blinked at it like the ink could explain what I had just heard. "Wait, what?" I asked, still half smiling. "The meeting with the caterer, we can reschedule." "Or did you mean the wedding?" James said. US. Each word landed like stone slabs on my chest. I sat completely still as the room tilted around me. The sun that had filled my dining room minutes earlier now seemed too bright, too exposed. Wedding magazines slid to the floor like falling dominoes. I don't understand," I whispered. "Yesterday we were looking at flights for Bora Bora," you said. "Your family came to my office today." The tone in his voice was formal now, measured, like he was talking to someone he didn't quite know. "My mom and Blair?" I asked. "Why would they showed me things, Davina, documents about your past, rehab records, mental health evaluations. Your mom said they've been covering for you for years, that they didn't want to interfere before. But they couldn't let me go through with the wedding without knowing. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt caged. James, that's not true. That's not what alcoholism? What mental health issues? They had medical records. A letter from a therapist recommending inpatient treatment. He paused. They said you were in rehab last February. When I'd had the flu and worked 16-hour days prepping for the Henderson wedding. When he had brought me soup and rubbed my back. No, I said, my voice trembling. I was at the event planning conference in Chicago. I have the badge, the contacts, the photos. I was never in rehab, that's a lie. But James didn't sound convinced. Do I even know you? He asked, quiet, but with finality. That hurt worse than anything else. Not the supposed documents, not even the betrayal from my family, but that this man, my person, didn't recognize me anymore. I can't build a life with someone who'd hide something that's serious, he added, and his voice cracked on the last word. James, I begged, please, listen to me. Whatever they told you, it isn't true. I swear on my life, I've never been in rehab. I've never had a drinking problem. I've never lied to you. Silence stretched across the line like a blade. Goodbye, Davina. The call ended. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, showing my reflection. Wide eyes, pale face, shaking hands. For a moment I wondered if I'd lost touch with reality. Had I somehow blacked out months of my own life? Was there some truth I had missed? But no. I knew who I was. I remembered every detail of February. Every day at the conference, every person I'd met. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't an alcoholic. I wasn't broken. But someone wanted James to think I was. I stumbled to the mirror, needing to see myself, the Davina I knew. Same face, same hands. But this time trembling from something deeper than shock. From the cold, creeping betrayal of knowing the people I trusted most had handed a man I loved a lie big enough to burn my entire future to ash. And as that reality settled into my bones, another memory surfaced. Christmas dinner, announcing our engagement. Blair's frozen smile. Mom's too bright. Well, this is certainly a surprise. It hadn't started with this call. It had started long before. And it was time to find out exactly how deep the lies went. The first place I drove to wasn't James's apartment. It was Blair's. I didn't know what I was going to say. I only knew I needed answers, needed to see her face when I asked why. Needed to hear it from her mouth that she was the one who shattered my life with lies. My hands trembled as I rode the elevator to the 14th floor. Her apartment door opened before I even knocked, almost like she'd been expecting me. Champagne flute in hand, perfect lipstick, please smile. Well, hello, little sister, she said, leaning against the doorframe. Shouldn't you be finalizing wedding plans? I wanted to scream, cry, hit her. But all that came out was one word. Why? Blair's smile didn't falter. She took a slow sip of her drink, watching me. He deserved to know the truth, she said. We were protecting him. There is no truth, I snapped. You made it up, rehab, therapy, none of that happened. She shrugged like it didn't matter. Did we? Or did you just convince yourself your problems aren't real? That's what unstable people do, Davina. My mouth went dry. The gaslighting wasn't even subtle. It was calculated, rehearsed. She didn't expect me to fight back. She expected me to unravel. You destroyed my relationship, I said, my voice tight. You ruined my future. Blair stepped aside just far enough for me to glimpse the inside of her apartment. Glossy magazines, high-end furniture, the illusion of a life built on success. But I saw it for what it really was, a stage. And I had been cast as the scapegoat. You're used to being abandoned anyway, she said, the smile finally dropping. Remember Dad walking out when you were 16? He left because of your behavior too. I stared at her. My father had left because he discovered Mom's affair. We all knew, we just never said it aloud. Now Blair was rewriting even that history. I backed away, heart pounding. I won't let you destroy anything else, I told her. She raised her glass in mock toast. Good luck convincing anyone to believe you over Mom and me. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't just about James. This had happened before. My college boyfriend Michael, who ghosted me after meeting my family. The high-profile job interview that fell through after a strange reference check. The clients who canceled mysteriously after Blair bumped into them. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't coincidence, it was them. They'd been doing this for years. And I had trusted them with every vulnerable moment, every confession, every fear. Blair had held my hand as I cried about past breakups. Mom had poured wine and said I could always trust my family, and the whole time they were collecting ammunition. I got back in my car and sat for a full minute, hands gripping the wheel, breath coming fast. This wasn't just sabotage, it was warfare. And I was done playing the victim. I didn't call James, I didn't cry on the bathroom floor. I didn't post a cryptic status update or drown in wine. Instead, I called Margaret Parker, the best attorney in the city for defamation cases. Her voice was crisp, no nonsense. Margaret Parker. It's Davina Hughes, I said, forcing calm into my tone. I need your help. My mother and sister have been spreading false information about me. They convinced my fiancé I'm an alcoholic with fabricated medical records. There was a beat of silence. Then, come to my office tomorrow. If what you're saying is true, that's not just sabotage, that's defamation. And we will address it legally. For the first time since James hung up, I felt something that wasn't despair. It was resolve. They thought they could erase my truth, rewrite my life, destroy my future, and I'd just crumble like before. But this time, I had something they didn't expect. A plan. And the truth. Margaret Parker's office smelled like old leather and lavender, the kind of scent that made you sit up straighter. Her law degrees lined the wall behind her desk, a subtle flex that needed no explanation. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Just a sharp nod and, start from the beginning. I did. Everything. James's call. The accusations. The fake rehab story. Blair's smug confession. Every sharp-edged detail I tried to keep from breaking me spilled out in fast, breathless sentences. Margaret didn't interrupt. She just took notes with a silver pen, her jaw tightening with each new revelation. When I finally finished, her only response was to reach across the desk and hand me a glass of water. You're not crazy, she said. You're not imagining things. This is methodical, it's personal. And it's actionable, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. What they've done, she continued, could qualify as defamation, tortious interference, possibly even fraud if those medical records were forged. But more than that, it's a pattern, and that's key. She stood and pulled a fresh legal pad from her shelf. We're going to document everything, every lost client, every ruined relationship, every suspicious coincidence. Something about her certainty steadied me. I wasn't spiraling anymore. I was investigating. Over the next few days, Margaret became more than just my attorney. She became my anchor. Her office turned into command central. Evidence boards covered her walls. Color-coded files stacked neatly in labeled folders. She traced the patterns I'd missed and made the ones I suspected undeniable. Look at this, she said one afternoon, sliding a printed timeline across the desk. Every serious relationship you've had ended within 2 weeks of that person meeting your family. I stared at the names. Michael, my college boyfriend. Thomas, the guy from my first job. Jason, from last year. James. All of them gone within days of family introductions. Margaret didn't stop there. She started contacting them. Michael responded first. I always felt like something was off, he said. I got this weird email from someone warning me about her. I saved it because it just didn't sit right. He forwarded the email, anonymous, eerily formal, but the language, for her own well-being. She's not emotionally stable. You deserve the truth before you get too invested. Margaret raised an eyebrow. This phrase, for her own well-being, Blair used those exact words when she spoke to you, right? I nodded slowly. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. They hadn't just lied to James. They'd been sabotaging my life for years, quietly, systematically, and with disturbing precision. We collected more proof, emails from other exes, messages from former clients who were suddenly warned off, canceled contracts, missed opportunities. Some people ghosted, others admitted they'd been manipulated. And all roads led back to Blair and Mom. It was no longer a theory. It was a strategy. Margaret leaned back in her chair one evening and said, "You know what this is, right?" "What?" "A smear campaign. You were never supposed to succeed. You were supposed to be the fragile one, the broken one. The one they could manage. I felt the truth of it like ice in my spine, but now the roles were shifting. I wasn't the fragile one anymore. I wasn't begging for understanding or trying to convince anyone of who I really was. I had evidence, I had an attorney, I had allies. And I had nothing left to lose. It was time to stop defending myself. It was time to go on offense. Over the next several days, Margaret's office transformed from a law firm into something that felt more like a tactical war room. Timelines stretched across whiteboards. A color-coded evidence board dominated one wall, pinned with sticky notes, photos, printed emails, and strings of red yarn connecting people, events, and outcomes. It looked like something out of a crime drama, and, in a way, it was the crime.
Systematic character assassination, the motive, control, jealousy, image, the suspects.
My own mother and sister? Margaret's approach was surgical. Every claim Blair and Mom had made about me had to be disproven with facts. Verifiable, time-stamped, indisputable facts. We started with the Rehab story. February, right? Margaret asked, flipping through my planner. Yeah, I said. I was at the Chicago event planning conference. Good, let's prove that. We pulled everything. The registration email, the confirmation invoice, hotel receipts, badge photos, tagged social media posts, emails with conference contacts, all time-stamped. All airtight. Then the smoking gun, an outline in Blair's handwriting that a former colleague, who had once helped Blair with an event, found tucked in a notebook, helping James see the truth. It listed tactics, including, claim Davina was in rehab during Chicago, use concerned family friend narrative, emphasize instability and past breakups, present therapist letter fabricated. My stomach churned reading it. This wasn't a one-off betrayal. This was premeditated. And it went further. We contacted Michael again, my college boyfriend who'd ghosted me after a promising start. He'd kept an old email too. Same anonymous tone, same wording. Then Jason, a client I'd dated briefly last year, same thing. An email warning him I was emotionally erratic and had manipulative tendencies tied to untreated trauma. Do you know how they sent these? I asked Margaret one night. She nodded. We pulled the metadata. All of them trace back to your mom's IP address. And based on timestamps, Blair was the only one home during those hours. I sat in stunned silence. The quiet, passive-aggressive comments. The strange timing of client cancellations. The friendships that ended out of nowhere. It wasn't me. It had never been me. Your neighbor, Mrs. Wilkins? Margaret added. She told me your mom spoke to her once about being concerned for your mental state. That's why she stopped inviting you to her garden parties. She thought she was protecting her guests. I let out a dry laugh. Because God forbid someone unbalanced show up near the hydrangeas. Margaret didn't smile. This is serious. They've damaged your professional reputation, your personal credibility, and they've isolated you for years under the guise of concern, piece by piece. The narrative I'd been fed of being unlucky, fragile, forgettable, came undone. They hadn't just manipulated people, they'd manipulated me. Blair sabotaged my Henderson wedding client, introducing them to a competing planner and accidentally implying I might not show up. The client confirmed it via email and even forwarded Blair's message. It read, "She's brilliant, but sometimes a little unreliable. Just a heads up." I felt sick. My own mother had called a job interviewer for a role I'd been a shoo-in for, offering a private word of caution. The woman hadn't hired me, but now, 5 years later, she apologized in a voicemail after we sent her part of the timeline. They made it sound like you were unstable, she said. And honestly, they were so convincing. That was the part that hit hardest. How convincing they were. No drama. No explosions, just calm, practiced concern. The tone of people who mean well. The evidence piled up, each file, screenshot, and audio recording another brick in a wall I would use to pin them in. We'll start with a cease and desist, Margaret said. Then prep for a defamation suit. You have more than enough. But I wasn't ready to stop there. I want them to say it, I told her. In their own words. I want to record it. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. That would make the case airtight. But more importantly, it would make them finally face the truth they've tried to bury for years. We planned every second of it. The confrontation wouldn't happen in a screaming match or a parking lot meltdown. No, this would be precise, controlled, public. Blair's engagement party was the perfect opportunity. Nearly 100 guests, family, friends, her future in-laws. People who had known me for years and yet had begun to look at me with suspicion, pity, or both. We set up quietly. Margaret secured an invitation for me and several key allies, Aunt Susan, Uncle William, and Judge Thompson, father of Blair's fiancé, Thomas. The country club staff helped us install the projector in the anteroom where toasts would be delivered. They assumed I was doing a last-minute presentation for the couple. They weren't wrong. 2 hours before the party, I stood in Margaret's office one last time. She laid out our evidence, a digital timeline connecting years of sabotage. Verified emails with IP addresses traced to my mother's home. Audio clips of Blair admitting she told James I had issues, medical records proving I had no history of rehab or psychological treatment. The forged documents James had seen discredited by a forensic document analyst. Statements from ex-boyfriends, former clients, and job references who had all been contacted and misled by either Blair or Mom. Truth doesn't need a performance. Margaret reminded me. Just a platform. When I arrived at the country club, my hands were steady. Until I saw my dad standing near the entrance. Your mother said you're planning something tonight, he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. She said you're trying to ruin Blair's engagement. No, I replied, voice calm. I'm trying to restore my own life. He looked conflicted, but he didn't stop me. Inside, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and champagne flutes. Blair looked radiant in blush silk, glowing with attention. She spotted me and froze mid-laugh. The music quieted. Heads turned. Margaret stepped beside me and whispered, "It's time." I walked up to the small stage near the projection screen and tapped the mic. Thank you all for being here. I know tonight is supposed to be about celebration. But before we toast, I need to share something about my family. And the truth they've tried to bury. A wave of confusion moved through the crowd. I clicked the remote. Slide 1. An email from Blair to my ex Michael dated 3 days after he met my family. It read, "We're concerned about Davina's drinking. Please don't confront her. She needs help, not judgment." I clicked again. Slide 2. The metadata IP address traced to my mother's home, time-stamped when Blair was the only one home. Gasps echoed. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. My voice never wavered. I've never been to rehab. I've never been treated for instability. But I've lost relationships, clients, and job offers based on lies spread quietly by my mother and sister. Slide 3. Audio clip. She doesn't even know we're protecting her. Blair's voice played, smug and clear. She thinks she's fine. But someone has to stop her from screwing everything up. Aunt Susan stood from her seat. This has been happening for decades, she said. They did the same thing to Jennifer in '98. Claims she had a breakdown after she confronted them about Grandma's will. Judge Thompson took a printed document from Margaret, eyebrows furrowed. Is this a forged medical record? Yes, Margaret confirmed, presented to Davina's fiancé. Proven fake by a court-approved analyst. Blair stood now, voice brittle. This is a vendetta. She's always been jealous. Thomas turned to her. Did you send these emails? Silence. I'm done, he said, removing the ring from her finger and placing it on the table. Elaine, my mother, stepped forward, eyes glassy. You've embarrassed us in front of everyone. No, I said, calm and sure. You did that the moment you chose lies over love. I left the stage to stunned silence. The power that had hung over me for years crushing invisible broke in that moment. People looked at me differently now. Some with shame. Some with awe. But no one looked at me with pity. Not anymore. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It came in waves. The first wave hit that night, right there in the glittering ballroom as Blair stormed out, her heels clicking furiously across the marble floor. Mom followed seconds later, still clinging to her shredded dignity like a shawl. The silence they left behind was louder than any apology they could have given. No one stopped them. The second wave came the next morning. Texts, emails, missed calls. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered me, friends who had quietly faded, colleagues who'd believed the whispers. They apologized. Some said they always had a weird feeling about how things had unfolded. Others admitted they'd chosen the path of least resistance, and now regretted it. I believed her because she sounded so calm, one client messaged. But you showed the truth. Then came James. He emailed one line. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how badly they'd lied. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't respond. Because closure doesn't always come with a conversation. Sometimes it comes in the form of silence, knowing you no longer need someone else's validation to stand tall. Within days, Blair's engagement was officially off. Thomas's family, especially Judge Thompson, had no interest in tying themselves to a woman with a paper trail of malicious deception. Her carefully curated social media presence vanished. Her sponsors dropped her. Publicly, she cited emotional burnout. Behind the scenes, she was facing legal pressure. Margaret sent cease and desist letters to both her and my mother, in bold print. Cease further defamatory communication or face legal action. They signed them. The signatures are now framed on the wall of my new office. The third wave was deeper, quieter. My dad called. I saw it all, the emails. The recordings. I'm sorry, Davina. It wasn't dramatic. There were no violins playing in the background. But the sincerity in his voice, the regret meant more than I expected. He started showing up. For brunch, for small talk. For long overdue conversations about where he'd been when I needed him most. And I started healing, not all at once, but enough to feel the weight lift day by day. The people who mattered saw me now. Not the distorted version my mother and sister had painted. Me. The real me. And in that clarity, I realized something important. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had reclaimed something far more powerful. My story, my voice. My future. Healing didn't come as a single moment. It came in routines. The quiet hum of my espresso machine. The gentle tap of my assistant's heels down the hall. The way my office filled with sunlight mid-morning, hitting the framed cease and desist letter like a trophy I never knew I'd need. My business grew faster than I expected. Maybe because people respected my resilience. Maybe because I was finally operating without the invisible sabotage. Maybe just because I no longer questioned my own instincts. Whatever the reason, the shift was real and I felt it in every part of me. Meetings used to leave me drained, second-guessing myself, wondering if I sounded off. Now I led them, confident, unapologetic, strategic. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was building something that couldn't be taken from me, not with a lie. Not with a whisper campaign, not with a forged email. I hired Jessica, a bright-eyed event planning student who reminded me a little too much of who I used to be: eager, overworked, constantly doubting herself. During her first presentation, I watched her hesitate at the final slide, glancing at me like she needed permission to finish. You've got this, I told her. Trust your instincts. They're usually right. Especially when people try to convince you they aren't. She smiled, one of those smiles that starts timid and ends solid. The kind that says, okay, maybe I can. I knew that feeling. I built my life on it. Rebuilding didn't just mean business, though. It meant family chosen family. Aunt Susan came back into my life like she'd never left, telling me stories from the past I'd never heard. Elaine was always like this, she said over tea one night, just subtler when we were younger. You're the first one to hold a mirror to it and not flinch. My dad and I met every Sunday. At first, it was stiff, polite, but slowly it became something more, authentic. He'd bring old photos of me in dance recitals, birthday parties, kindergarten art shows. You were always so determined, he said once. Even when the world tried to tell you otherwise. Sometimes I thought about James, about what might have been if things had gone differently. But then I remembered the man who didn't even ask me for the truth, who believed people he'd only known a few years longer than me without a question. And I let it go. Some people are just detours on the way to finding yourself. The woman who once flinched when someone raised their voice now speaks calmly in boardrooms. The girl who once cried in bathrooms after family dinners now throws open the curtains every morning and runs a team of her own. They tried to destroy my story. Instead, they sharpened it. And in doing so, they gave me the one thing they never meant to: power. 6 months later, my apartment feels like a different place. Not because of the furniture or the light or the photos lining the walls, but because it's mine now, fully mine. No shadows in the corners, no voices in my head doubting my worth. Just peace. The cease and desist letters remain framed above my desk, not as trophies but reminders. Of what I endured, of what I overcame. Of the cost of silence, and the power of truth. People still ask if I'll ever forgive my mother and Blair. My answer is simple. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to carry their weight anymore. They moved away indefinitely after the engagement party. No apologies. No explanations. Just silence, which in their case is louder than words. For now that's enough, and honestly, I'm not angry anymore. They built a house of lies. I tore it down with truth. My focus is forward now. The business has expanded. I opened a new downtown office. I mentor young women who come from fractured families, helping them navigate careers in event planning without shrinking themselves to fit someone else's version of acceptable. One of them asked me recently, "How do you stay so calm when people question your reputation?" I smiled and said, "Because their version of me is no longer my truth. I don't flinch when someone says my name in a crowded room. I don't lower my voice to avoid seeming too emotional. I don't search people's faces for approval before finishing a sentence. I just live, whole, unapologetic, clear, and that more than anything is my revenge. Not because I hurt them back, but because I built something real, because I healed, because I'm free." I used to think the truth needed defending, constantly, loudly, desperately. But I've learned something far more powerful. The truth, when armed with evidence and spoken with clarity, stands on its own. They tried to rewrite my story, but I took the pen back and wrote the ending myself. If you've ever been doubted, gaslighted, or betrayed by those closest to you, know this: you are not alone. Your story matters. Speak it. Own it. And never let someone else's lies define your truth. If this story moved you, comment and subscribe for more stories of survival and strength.